Discovering possibilities and potential with passion every day. This is a TPPN production. Welcome to the iPad Possibilities Podcast, episode number 100, FileMaker, Part 2. Well, this is episode 100 of the iPad Possibilities Podcast. Quite a big mile marker here as far as podcasting terms. I can't wait till I hit 1,000. That'll be another big one, and the next 100 should be a blast as well. But for today's episode 100, I've got a very special kind of series on FileMaker. This is part 2, and this will be the last FileMaker episode for a while until we have some big updates from them. But this one, I will have basically a roundtable opening up the podcast. It's about 24 minutes long or so. And then for part 2, I've got John of seedcode.com, and I'm just going to do one-on-one interview, and basically this is a great episode to learn more about FileMaker, how it can benefit you and using it on your iPad. So lots of great information. I was really quite a student in this episode, learning from two just fantastically brilliant FileMaker developers. So I hope you as listeners are able to learn something as well from this episode, as there's a lot of good material here to just learn what FileMaker is all about and how it all integrates with the iPad and why it is such an incredible application. And it's more than just an application, as I learned from these guys. It's really a software development platform. From within this application, anybody can write applications that deal with data. So it's a really powerful, system of managing data and having your own applications written for you in just a couple of hours with FileMaker and its developing platform. So And the cool thing with this is the developing platform gets carried over onto the iPad with their Go app. So I think it was a great topic for 100. I am looking forward to the next 100. I'd love topic ideas for the next podcast, next episode. So you can send those to iPadPossibilities@gmail.com and 209-542-iPad. And without further ado, let's jump into episode 100 of the iPad Possibilities Podcast with the Roundtable segment. Well, welcome. We are here today with John and Tim. We talked to Tim last week, and we'll be speaking with John one-on-one later on in this podcast. Welcome, guys.
Hi.
Hey there.
And today we're going to be doing this FileMaker Roundtable, as I want to call it. And to get it off and running, I was wondering, is there a FileMaker community out there? Are there like user groups and conventions that FileMaker users can learn more about FileMaker at? And
I think one of the big things is the FileMaker Developer Conference. It happens once a year in someplace hot, usually. About 1,000 to 1,500 FileMaker developers from all over the world get together. It's really a great community. I mean, I think that people are really willing to share with each other and have great ideas and new techniques. It's really an inspiring kind of event, I think, for FileMaker developers to go and see what other people are doing with the tool.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who got into this, part of the reason they stuck with it is because they found the community was kind of different from other tech communities they've been in. There's a lot of sharing. There's a number of user lists and forums where people will, debug your scripts and write little code bits for you. And really, it's a very generous group, and it was a big reason why I kind of stayed with it when I was new to it.
Okay. And is there, like with this conventions type stuff, are there big keynotes, and what are those like on? Is it like the new stuff you're doing with FileMaker, or?
Yeah, the convention usually starts off with, they want to talk about the new product, and then a lot of developers do kind of, single topic sessions. There's also a pretty wide user group community. This FMPUG kind of organizes all the FileMaker Pro user groups, nationally and internationally, and there's some kind of other conferences starting up. FileMaker's been running one in France. There's one in Germany, and there's a unconference here called Pause on Air that I'm involved with. The community is just kind of proliferating. I think as FileMaker started introducing more and more portable code, like variables and the ability to import and export scripts. Once code sharing got easier, the community, it was just like gas on the community fire, and the community just started getting richer and richer, and the ecosystem keeps kind of growing. And now we're seeing the fruit of those changes that were introduced in the product a few years ago. And yeah, the user group scene is much more alive than it was just 2 or 3 years ago.
That's pretty remarkable, because I know in the Apple community, user groups have dropped off as the internet becomes more of a way people do that now.
Yeah, there still seems to be this kind of, I think it's because a lot of us are just kind of solo, practitioners or in-house. There is this kind of need for like physical, face-to-face contact with people who are doing the same kind of stuff you're doing.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my next question is more towards the iPad. You create databases, obviously, with FileMaker, and what new types of databases do you think people will start creating? What different scenarios are people going to start using the iPad and iPhone for with FileMaker now?
Well, I think it's really about taking your data mobile, bringing it places that you couldn't before. And in a lot of cases, it may not be your entire database, but it'll be a subset of the most important information. And being able to go someplace and send them a live invoice, for example, or one of the examples that one of my clients, we're actually going to bring iPads into a live judging ring with the Minnesota State Fair, for example, and a place where it's even hard to get Wi-Fi maybe. So you have the ability to use the 3G connectivity to post results and things like that.
Yeah, that's neat. Tell me that's a wrestling thing. I think that would be awesome. We're seeing iPads popping up in like doctors' offices as the sign-in sheet, so somebody can come into the doctor's office, instead of walking up to a clipboard, they grab one of 2 or 3 iPads, and so in addition to signing in to the practice to say they're confirming the terms of service that may have changed since they were last there, or updating their address. And so there's a little more two-way kind of communication than was possible with just the sign-in clipboard and stuff.
And is FileMaker then being used in medical offices?
Yeah, FileMaker's always had kind of a real strong presence in small medical, because it's for FileMaker's thing is for people who build their own tools. And if you're a Mac user and you don't have a lot of IT, but you have a small dental practice or a massage clinic or a boutique dermatology practice, you have all the scheduling problems of a big office without any of the IT support.
Right.
That's where FileMaker likes to be.
The private practice is not the big corporation hospitals with small practices out of that.
Well, both. It's funny. I just saw a demonstration of a ER scheduling solution that Kaiser's using in FileMaker. Kaiser Permanente is a big FileMaker user.
Oh, wow.
And, they have the same kind of thing. Like, they have the same problem. They have work groups that can't get access to IT resources, or who need to iterate faster than corporate IT can move. So, you see FileMaker in both places, right? As in work groups in huge corporations, and then in these kind of small medical situations which is more like private practice.
Right.
Yeah, so it's certainly helping the push to go paperless, because it's just the form factor of being able to hold it and write on it more easily, puts it in places that it couldn't go before.
Yeah. It's also, I think, a concept shift. People are like, when I see the stuff that people are having on their iPads, I see a lot of kind of back office databases. I'm not seeing that many kind of specialty data entry apps, but people are just thinking about using their database in different places because there is this kind of tablet metaphor. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. It's early. I mean, we don't really know where this thing is going to go yet.
Right. The Go for iPad has only been out for a couple months, and the iPad itself is less than a year old. So.
Yep.
This next question, it kind of goes along with those databases, but the way I'm starting to think about these databases is that they themselves are becoming apps within an app. So are we going to see really cool databases that are like apps within apps that you can just download off of Safari and start turning FileMaker Go into something, say, quite different or quite useful?
Well, I think what Go does is it brings it lowers the bar for app development. I mean, if you're right that you can kind of download an app from Safari into FileMaker Go and start running it, that means that just a lot of different people can start authoring apps. And so you'll see just much more specialized stuff for the iPad. So, I mean, there's some pretty, specific apps out there. They tend to be kind of expensive, but real boutique apps that only like make sense for my company or for my division of my company. That's what I think is new. Is that you'll be kind of using less generic tools on the pad and more stuff that's really, really specific to what your business is doing.
Yeah, it can really provide a competitive advantage for a company much more easily because the lower bar of how to develop that application and connecting to existing data if they already have FileMaker. You do need to do some specific development in general to make your database really run well on the mobile platform because of the screen size and things. But it's a smaller investment than it used to be.
Right, and I'm sure it's a lot better than trying to do everything on the iPhone.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. In the big picture, I think the iPhone was the transformative device that taught us what ubiquitous computing could be, right? A computer
Right.
that knows where you are, how fast you're moving. For me, at least so far, and maybe this is my age showing, the iPad is less revolutionary than that phone first was.
Well, they need the phone to get the iPad in the mainstream. If they just released the iPad originally,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it would have been successful.
Right. You wonder if it's like this kind of teaser thing. Hide it in a form factor that people are already familiar with, right? A phone. I know what that is.
Yeah. And the
Sure.
first one, when I picked up the iPhone, I was always wanting more and wanting this huge screen in this form factor, and they finally gave it to us.
Yeah, indeed.
I think people have been wanting this larger form factor after using the iPhone, seeing its limitations. And if it was the opposite, I'm not sure if it would have been as successful.
Agreed.
So we've got FileMaker Go 1.1 that was just released. Say like a year from now, 2.0 hits. What are the big things that are still lacking from the Go app? I know it's a big question.
Tim, what's your top few?
I think that if we had some sort of assistance with the ability to sync offline, I think that would be a really big win.
Yeah, that's huge.
Because then you can take it where you don't have any internet connection, but then when you connect back up, it's syncing in general is just a difficult thing to do. So any help would be welcomed.
Yeah, that's interesting. I also think that we're still using the desktop metaphors in Go. So basically, we can click. But FileMaker introduced script triggers in 10, and so now we're creating all of these really rich behaviors on the desktop using script triggers. But those triggers are all in the desktop metaphor. They're about click and stuff and modify and type. And if we had triggers that understood the iOS environment and could trigger FileMaker actions on swipe, rotate, click hold, that would let us, approximate these behaviors. Because users are bringing all these expectations to our FM Go apps. I remember the day it was released, people would call me up and say, hey, if I make an edit in my FileMaker Go app, is that edit automatically posted to Facebook? And they're like, can I shake FM Go to erase the date? I mean, they expect it to behave like other.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Not yet, right.
So basically, right now, it's a great way to just view, and you're able to edit it in a similar manner you would in the desktop, but you're really looking for a way that FileMaker will start to understand the iPad as something different.
I would just like some more of those behaviors. I mean, on the upside, what's really nice here is that FileMaker, for the first time in a while, has an app they can rev and iterate really quickly.
And so, since it is owned by Apple, they don't have any problems getting it approved either.
Well, there's who knows, right?
I wasn't sure if they had some backdoor to the App Store or whatever, because I'd imagine
it does seem to do some pretty amazing stuff that other apps are having a hard time with, but. No, I just mean that with their regular product, they have millions of installed users, and they can't just they can't go crazy with changes and stuff because they have this long tail to protect. But with this new platform, man, they have a distribution mechanism in the App Store, and they don't have cross-platform compatibility to worry about. They don't have an install base to worry about as much. They can go crazy.
Yeah, it seems like the initial product, the 1.0 and 1.1, are pretty complete from just listening to you guys talk about it, just, syncing and just making it more touch friendly.
No, yeah, it's pretty. I think we were all impressed with how solid it is out of the door.
Yep. It's pretty amazing what they were able to do on a small device. Yeah,
and most of the things do carry over then to the iPad as far as when you're developing
The fidelity,
databases?
the fidelity is shocking. It's so high.
Is there anything that just doesn't get carried over? Is it just all there? I was wondering, robust databases, do those really work on the iPad well?
Well, you do have a screen size issue, right? But aside from that, I think the biggest thing that we've found is that there are things that the iPad resolution is a little less forgiving. So we occasionally have to go into our layouts and change the stack order of a couple objects. But these are very complicated layouts that I'm talking about, like grids and Gantt charts and stuff that just require a little tweaking so they still look good on both. But in my experience, the fidelity is very, very high.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about it last week about just modifying your database so that basically scripts can be interrupted in the middle of them. That kind of thing is something you have to watch out for. But it's not difficult, really. I mean, it's just takes a little extra time.
Do you think a FileMaker will eventually... They've got development tools, obviously, on their desktop app. Will they have more specialized development tools on the Mac and Windows to develop, iPhone or iPad apps that let you know, hey, this is what the iPad screen looks like, sort of like in the app development world, you have this little simulator for the iPad. Will that be something that would be helpful?
Well, right now that need is kind of being filled by some existing templates that you can get. I could see that if they wanted to take it the next step, they could implement some sort of auto screen sizing kind of thing in FileMaker. It's not there today, but I'm just imagining. I don't know anything about future releases.
Right.
Yeah, I see the tenor of the company kind of being like, if you follow a few simple rules, your screen should look good no matter where you deploy it. And I think that's the answer they'd like to have, rather than having to craft, viewers or previewers or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to move kind of towards, the individual or family that wants to use FileMaker. Because I've seen a lot of uses with, businesses and things, but what could an individual or family use a FileMaker for?
I think the number one thing is contact management. I mean, everybody has people that they know and places that they visit on the internet, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And just to manage all those things in one place under one password. I manage my life in FileMaker. It's pretty much the application besides email that is open on my machine all the time, even being, besides being a developer. And so storing all that kind of information, like your insurance, your bills, those kind of things in one place is just very helpful. I don't even use QuickBooks or Quicken anymore. It's all done in FileMaker.
Yeah, I think there's a tinkering thing that FileMaker rewards. Folks who want to stitch together a couple of templates and build something and have their computer work the way they want it to, as opposed to using different apps for all sorts of stuff. FileMaker's a great way to kind of get to that. I mean, there are apps that do passwords and there are apps that do contacts, but to have kind of one place for that stuff and to be able to tinker with it. If you have that tinkering itch, FileMaker's really addictive.
Okay, cool. Well, kind of along with that is, I know FileMaker's very mainstream in the enterprise and more technical tweaker market. Do you think it'll go more mainstream with just individual users, or will always be the high end business users?
I think that Bento has a place in there. It's a lot lower entry price point, $50. And so but I think that there will be people who play with Bento and want to do more. So then they'll eventually upgrade to FileMaker.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I think some people would share the opposite impression of FileMaker, right? That it's just for kind of small users and that it doesn't have big penetration in enterprises and among real geeks. So it kind of depends on who you talk to. But one of the things I've been thinking about lately is, what kind of users have FileMaker problems, right? The problems that FileMaker shares is letting you map complicated data and share it. And so, a small family may have those kind of problems. They may not. A small business probably does have those kind of problems. A small business that's got no headquarters definitely has those problems, right? I have 3 lawyers that each work out of their home. They share a caseload. There's no there, right? There's no receptionist. There's no office. The only thing binding these guys together is their client list and their database. And they definitely have FileMaker problems. So I see that kind of thing as work moves in that direction, FileMaker gets picked up a lot more.
Yeah. Okay.
You say FileMaker problems, you mean problems that can be solved by FileMaker.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Sorry. That's why I don't do marketing for them, right?
Just want to be clear.
FileMaker solutions.
Yes.
So my next question here is about FileMaker. Is it sort of a boxed-in workspace, or can it sync with other services? Like, can it sync with other places that save data and use that kind of stuff? Like I saw you had some iCal integration. How does integration with other apps, and does that happen much?
Yeah, it does. I mean, FileMaker Server is kind of the key for that, right? FileMaker Server can both, with scripted processes, can both consume other data services and can be a host, can be consumed by other data services. So I don't know if this is something that the consumer gets into very much, but developers, we do this stuff all the time. There's plugins that will both make FileMaker a web service, so you can hit it with WSDLs and other kind of web service requests. And then there are plugins that'll let FileMaker consume web services and do all sorts of amazing stuff like auto dialing and just all kinds of consumption stuff. And then on the more prosaic level, there's all sorts of interaction with Outlook and QuickBooks and again, via plugins. And FileMaker Server is kind of the key to that, because you can schedule these scripts on FileMaker Server to periodically, pump your contacts out to Outlook or periodically post your invoices to QuickBooks.
Okay.
Right. I often see FileMaker as really, it's a great integrator. It can connect to so many other systems like Oracle and Microsoft's SQL Server and MySQL. And getting data in and out of FileMaker is really pretty easy.
Yeah, people think of it as like the hub. It's the part that they can control, and they can grab the data from disparate places in the organization and kind of present that in one spot.
Right.
And some of that's really easy. This integration with SQL sources is kind of built into FileMaker, and some of it requires third-party stuff, right? Like these plugins to go to Outlook and QuickBooks. But FileMaker definitely gets that, like, this is part of their message, right? Like in a small IT organization, a little database gets created, it quickly becomes workgroup critical, it then becomes line of business critical, and at that point it needs to play well with the other mission critical apps in the organization. It needs to share its data and then consume data from other places. So FileMaker knows that if they're going to continue to play once they become line of business critical, they have to be a good hub.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'm just kind of interested to see if it would work with like Evernote and other note services to store data and take pictures of receipts. That you can have it automatically throw in a FileMaker or something.
The glib answer from a developer is if there's an API out there for Evernote or for FreshBooks or something, right? We have plugins that can let us post and work with APIs. So in general, yeah. But is Evernote integration out of the box or within the domain of your average kind of tinker developer? Maybe not.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of behind the scenes power then with FileMaker.
Indeed.
So with that behind the scenes power, my kind of final question is, what kind of wow factor things have you guys done with FileMaker today, and what have you seen other people do that just kind of wowed you?
I got a couple of things. Well, one thing that's kind of just for fun, on my website you'll find a free database. I call it FM Magic, which is FileMaker doing magic tricks for you. So that's kind of a wow thing, but it's just for fun. And but I would say that the wow factor comes so often with clients in that they'll be doing something that takes them 35 hours every week to do some repetitive kind of task, and then you spend 2 to 5 hours of programming, and all of a sudden it's a one button click that does all that thing for them, and they see an immediate return on investment. That gets big wows from clients.
What kind of stuff can FileMaker automate like that? That sounds really cool.
Well, we had go ahead, Tim.
it depends on how they're doing it. I mean, often they're doing it in Excel and building their own manual kind of report where they have to copy and paste a million records or items back and forth and then sum things up and that kind of thing, where it's already in your database. FileMaker can just do it for you.
Yeah. We present a couple of case studies every year at DevCon, and a couple years ago we showed an example that a colleague had written that was for a university, and all the faculty at the university had their publishing history. It's a research university. Every time they apply for a grant, they have to include the latest kind of publishing history, and it takes a tremendous amount of effort for 60 or 70 of these researchers to go get all their publication histories. Every time they've been cited and all this stuff, kind of bring that into some kind of Word document, format it, and include it with these grant applications. And this guy built a FileMaker database that goes out to PubMed, which is a kind of a clearinghouse, a public clearinghouse for all this information, and greps through all the data in PubMed using these web services, brings that data down into FileMaker, links it with the researchers' records, formats it, and generates big text strings that they can paste into these grant applications. And I think it's saving them like 170 hours a month or something.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that FileMaker can really get up and rock and roll on. And again, with FileMaker Server and scheduling scripts, they actually never interact with this thing anymore. This data is just waiting for them in their database. It updates every Monday.
That's pretty sweet. Are there any other wow factor things that you guys have done? Or
Well, I mean, I think one of the biggest things is that when FileMaker introduced script triggers, which is the ability to have FileMaker kind of react to something a user does without the user telling FileMaker to do it, right? They don't have to click a button anymore. Now, when they're typing into a field and the length of the characters gets to a certain point, FileMaker just starts running scripts. Once that happened, we could stop building layouts and start building behaviors. Right. And so now I think the wow factor is that people are making, databases with we have some calendars that have drag and drop rescheduling, and you drag an event and that scheduling change cascades through all the related downstream events in the database, and things are just feeling a little more automated and snappy now. And I think that's what a lot of us are thinking about when we think of wow, is that, we can make these things that are a lot more responsive than just layouts with submit buttons at the bottom.
Right.
It's so funny how things that wow a client or a consumer of FileMaker and things that wow a developer in FileMaker can be totally different. It's like
yeah.
At the conference, we will see some little feature that FileMaker is going to incorporate in a new version that just we know saves us so much time and hassle in the future, and so it will get a big applause. But if I can just mention one of the things that I see, this new product Zulu, which that's your product, right, John?
Yeah.
That is a big wow. I mean, I've been looking at that and having the ability to visualize FileMaker dates and information right from iCal. That's amazing.
Yeah, thanks. We're pretty psyched about that. At the same time, that's one of those things it doesn't really give that great a demo. So you open iCal, you drag an event, the event moves, and you're like, dude, that just happened in FileMaker. And the user's like, that's what I expect. I expect when I move my event, right? It changes in my database.
Big deal. It is a big deal.
Right. Yeah, you're right. The things that wow us and the things that wow the customers are often a little divergent.
Yeah. Any other FileMaker topics guys want to discuss, or we good for today?
I don't know. I think the one thing that I'm thinking about most now is that it used to be that us FileMaker developers were always pushing the FileMaker desktop app, right? We were building things that the desktop developers hadn't envisioned. And this would be a lot of DevCon as guys standing up and be like, I got FileMaker to do this, and extending it, right? And now with FileMaker Go, I sometimes feel like the application is racing ahead of us, and we're playing catch up. It's doing all these new things, and it's being iterated more quickly, and we're, for the first time, kind of trying to catch up to it and understand what it can do. So I don't know, I'll be interested to see how that plays out over the next year.
Yep.
As far as FileMaker Go, adding photo functionality, where you can take pictures with your iPhone and stuff like that, or?
Well, no, as in terms of developers catching up to what's already there, I mean, there are all these ostensible features of Go, right? Mm-hmm. But what are the things that are latent in Go that we just haven't kind of caught up to yet?
Right.
Because that's how it's always worked in the desktops, that we see things in there and connect a few dots, and all of a sudden the desktop can do things like, be an iCal server. Right. That kind of innovation in FileMaker Go is coming.
Yeah. Awesome. That's exciting.
Yeah, it is.
Well, thank you again for your time today. And in a moment here, I'll just do a one-on-one with John, and we'll be discussing some of your products that have really caught my eye on your site. And thanks again, Tim, for your time. You can find Tim at, what's your website again?
Cimbra.com, CIMB as in boy, URA.com.
And John is found at, is it seedcode.com?
Yep, seedcode.com.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Cool.
Yeah,
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
So that concludes part 1 of this episode 100. And with that, let's move on to part 2. And part 2 is a one-on-one interview I did with John of seedcode.com. And once again, lots of great information here. And I had a lot of fun just talking with John about FileMaker. And I hope to do it again sometime when, future FileMaker updates come out and what it means for the iPad. So with that, let's go to part 2 of episode 100. Well, welcome back, and we're here again for part 2 of the FileMaker part 2 episode. I'm here with John. We just got off talking with Tim for the roundtable part. Now we're here for one-on-one, and I'd like to start off just kind of what's your background with FileMaker in general?
Yeah, thanks. Like a lot of people, I was using FileMaker for a small business of my own, and then at some point, I think around FileMaker 3, just started looking at this thing and being like, wow, man, you could probably make software people would buy with this. It was kind of relational. It started to print really well. And, one thing led to another, and I had a couple clients that were generous enough to kind of let me learn on their dime. They hired me to do big things that were way above my skill set, and I just kind of moved in until I learned enough about FileMaker to figure it out. And I think a lot of people just kind of wade into it that way.
Yeah. What's so a lot of people know what FileMaker is. How would you explain FileMaker to brand new clients or people you want to start working with?
Yeah, that's a good question. I generally tell people that FileMaker is a multi-user database that you don't have to be a developer to work with. That if you're familiar, with making, I used to say with making like PageMaker documents. I'm dating myself a little bit there, but if you're familiar with kind of dragging things around on the desktop, you can make database applications and share them with other people. That's what FileMaker lets you do. You don't have to be a developer to do it. And that there's this huge community of folks that make templates and resources that can help you. So in some sense, you can stitch together some stuff that other folks have made and create your own applications.
Right. And I've noticed the pricing of FileMaker is not for those that are, you probably go with Bento for something like that. But the price is rather, it's a pro application, it's for professionals.
Yeah, it's definitely.
And the templates and stuff, those are, in many cases, just as expensive as FileMaker itself. Is there a good, demo period? How are people able to try out these templates, make sure it works for them? Is that kind of different by developer, or?
Yeah. There's a range of templates. Some of which are free. There's some great free products. There's this thing called FM Starting Point. That's a whole kind of inventory, contacts, calendaring, invoicing solution that's completely free. But in general, FileMaker has a 30-day trial of the product. And then depending on the developer, there'll either be a light version or a time-bombed version of whatever utility you want to check out. And then a lot of the plugins, FileMaker has a plugin architecture where you can kind of add this little functionality. Like there might be a plugin to get FileMaker to run Groovy code, or a FileMaker to get, a plugin to get FileMaker to talk to QuickBooks. Those generally run for a few hours before you have to restart FileMaker or restart the server. Okay. So you can play around for a while before you have to plunk down some change, but.
And that's all built in the FileMaker. The development tools there allow for time expiration and stuff.
We have to craft our own time expiration. So the demos of our products, that's all our own code. There's unfortunately nothing that we can just kind of plug into in FileMaker's code base to let us do that. Gotcha. Yeah. But, this is a thing, right? FileMaker's really easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So how are you seeing people using FileMaker? What are the kind of use cases that are around today?
Well, I think it started replacing paper forms. In the old days, we would go into a company and they would say, I've got all this paper and I need to kind of put it into a database. And so we'd make layouts that replicated their paper forms. And all of a sudden, they're sharing all this information that used to be on paper. Now, I think what's happening is people already have digital workflows, but they're in separate apps. And so what they're looking to FileMaker to do is to integrate the things they're doing in a lot of different apps into one database so that they only have a single point of data entry and the information can talk to it itself, right? So a common use case is I'll have a project in an estimate in Excel and a meeting scheduled in iCal. And the meeting in iCal is about the project in Excel, but there's no way to go back and forth. When I'm on the road and I look at that, I have a meeting, I have to go somewhere else to figure out whether this is a $10,000 project or a $100,000 project. And when we do that in FileMaker and we have that meeting in FileMaker, we just click on a button and we see the project total, right there in our calendar, or we click a little arrow and jump over to that estimate and maybe create a revision of the estimate right there. So we're working in one place. And I think that's what most people are coming to FileMaker for now.
Okay, that makes sense because I see myself doing that kind of stuff. I use OmniFocus for one thing. It'd be cool. Is there a way to do mail within FileMaker? Is there templates for actually composing and sending out mail right within a database?
Absolutely, right. So FileMaker's got some built-in capability to either send mail out through your mail client or through your SMTP server. And then there are plugins that'll take that further and do things like bulk mail and HTML mail, and even teach FileMaker how to read mail servers. So FileMaker can read a particular mailbox or your entire mail server and suck all that email down into FileMaker. So a common thing we'll do when we're consulting is we'll set up an alias mailbox that's projects@yourcompanyname.com. And so if I emailed you, we might have a lot of kind of BS email about when we're going to meet together. But when we finally have that email where I send you the proposal, I'll BCC it to projects@filemaker.com, and it'll suck it in and find your email address, find mine, find the project we have in common, and link that email to that project. That's
pretty awesome. Does that stuff work in the Go app yet, or is that all desktop stuff still?
Well, so the sending works in Go, right? But the reading of the server, the inbound stuff, that's something that we schedule on FileMaker server. FileMaker server is kind of both the hub that arbitrates requests from different FileMaker users and the engine that periodically does things. So every 10 minutes, FileMaker server is going to go to your mail server and suck down projects@yourcompany.com. So Go is a client to this kind of thing, but Go isn't really doing the suckage.
Okay, but it could though. I mean, it could be connected to the server and reading it directly
and
from the
see
server.
That email. Absolutely right. It's seeing that data, but it's just not doing the things that we're all. And the desktop version isn't doing that stuff either. It's the server version that's kind of pulling down email, periodically processing things, and sending out email reminders about when if that meeting is coming up in 10 minutes. It's FileMaker server that's going to email all the contacts that are attending that meeting.
Okay, and I'm kind of curious on the server stuff. Do people, are there businesses that'll just, run servers for individuals to say you pay, $15 a month to have access to a server that you can have email sent through?
Yeah, there's a fairly rich kind of hosting community. It's a bit of a race to the bottom in terms of pricing. Excuse me, you can get FileMaker server hosting for like $10 a file. It's really inexpensive, but on some of those shared servers, you lose some of the power because some of those hosting providers won't let you run an automated process every few minutes on a shared server. You might need to get a dedicated server, and you can get dedicated hosting servers just like you can get dedicated web servers. So some companies are putting the server in the building, some companies are hosting the server, some are hosting a shared server, some are hosting a dedicated server. So there's a whole kind of range. It kind of depends how much stuff you want the server to be doing.
Right.
If the server's reading email every 2 minutes, your hosting provider might say that they prefer that not to be on a shared server.
Yeah. The shared stuff's probably more like the way you just have your FileMaker database on that server so you can access it in all your devices and computers and
save
to the same area.
Yeah, and then the more you want server to do, the more a dedicated server starts looking like an attractive option. But, hosting is also changing, with things like 2x and Citrix. We have hosting providers that are virtualizing more easily. So it's easier for them to give you what is in effect a dedicated server without, what we used to do, right, like co-locate a box or something.
Right.
So it is changing. And I think especially with Go, FileMaker Go, this iPad client, iPhone client, that really kind of wants a server in a way that maybe a small business didn't necessarily need a server before. And so as Go gets more popular and server becomes more attractive, I think we'll find more and more hosting companies getting the experience with virtualization that lets them say, yeah, you can do whatever you want on our server, QuickBooks plugins and email integration and everything. And there'll be less of a distinction between what's a shared server and what's a dedicated server.
Right. So you use FileMaker as a developer, and I'm wondering, how do you personally use FileMaker? Does it run your life at all, or what stuff do you do with it?
So, this is time for honesty, right? I use very little FileMaker in my business. I use my inbox for almost everything. If I were really honest with you, I'd say that our version control system is pretty much a bunch of text files. My license registration scheme is pretty much a hacked version of our mail server.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that your own tools come last, and that's definitely the case here. I use some FileMaker for doing really complicated data processing, right? When I need to send a mailing to everybody who bought a particular build of a particular calendar a certain number of years ago and hasn't upgraded since, and I can do that in FileMaker, perform that query, and send them a nice email saying that we've addressed this bug that's only in this old version of one of our products. But for day-to-day, like contact management and stuff, I sadly have never really given the time to build something nice for myself.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get into your stuff, your products that you guys have. I wandered over at seedcode.com and found a bunch of different things, and let's kind of just go through them. Some of them we may gloss through if they're not as, I guess, important. But
sure.
The first one's Seedcode Complete. So what is that? All your products in one, or what is that?
So the reason we call it complete is that our flagship product is a calendar, and many people are going to want to attach that calendar to something they already have. This is a template. We have a free version, in fact, but it's a template that lets you visualize FileMaker data in a calendar format, both a day, week, and month view, but also scheduling grids and Gantt charts and stuff. And so for most users, they already have the data they want to see in that calendar, and so they paste our calendar into their file. But for some people, they don't have the data yet, or the FileMaker file that they have is old, and they're kind of looking forward to starting over. So Seedcode Complete attaches the calendar to a whole kind of contact management system. It's got contacts and projects and invoices, and it's the kind of file that we use to start new consulting projects, and it's what our customers use when they want to start over. They want to get a new database, put my contacts in there, have a calendar, and kind of have it all tied together, as opposed to buying a calendar and attaching it to something they already have. So in that sense, Seedcode Complete is our most ready-to-use out-of-the-box product.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then Tim was talking earlier about Zulu. Can you kind of go into what is that? And
Sure. Yeah, Zulu is something we're really excited about. That's a collaboration between us and the amazing plugin developers at 360works.com. And Zulu turns FileMaker server into an iCal server. So if you have date information in your database, not just appointments, but project milestones or records for the utilization capacity of a given line of machinery on a particular day, you can see that information in iCal and edit it right in iCal, and it's going to be editing your FileMaker database directly. Zulu, in fact, makes iCal into a FileMaker Pro client, and it does it really seamlessly. It's really interesting. It kind of turns FileMaker into a CalDAV server. Yeah. So we're pretty excited about it.
I know if you want the Mac OS X server, it's like $500. So having that in FileMaker is kind of sweet.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. And also, we were talking about this idea of having different applications. You're already working in FileMaker. The dates are already there. So having this, in iCal, you may have a personal calendar next to it or whatever, but to be able to kind of take that FileMaker data out onto the road in whatever device, whatever iCal, the iCal on your phone, iCal on your iPad, and be able to edit and make new events in FileMaker from those devices.
That's great. Because if you have your iPad, open up calendars, that would edit.
Yeah, it edits it back in FileMaker. So one of our use cases for this is we have a client that runs the DA's office in Mobile, Alabama, and all court dockets are in FileMaker. Not only the judges' schedules, but all the PA schedules, attorney schedules, and then the dockets themselves, which court cases are up and what courtroom they're in. And so they publish that to iCal as something like 40 different calendars. Some calendars are for a courtroom, some are for a PA or for a judge. And then all the people surrounding the DA's office, they are subscribed to these calendars, and they can see what's happening, and then some of them, since Zulu respects FileMaker's access privileges, some of those people can edit some of those calendars and move their schedule around, right on their mobile device. It's pretty exciting for us.
That's pretty cool. Was that just launched then pretty recently?
Yeah, Zulu's like 34 days old.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's also the first product that we've ever published a roadmap of where we're going with it. So we have a feature roadmap going into January of next year that talks about the other things that you're going to be able to do with Zulu down the road, and we meet our first roadmap milestone this afternoon.
Oh, awesome! Good time.
Kind of psyched. Yeah, good time.
Well, before we move on, what is the feature of today?
Oh, so today we launch a new version of it's a free upgrade for folks. It will let Zulu work on servers that use SSL. It also lets Google Calendar see your FileMaker server in a read-only fashion. Further down the roadmap, Google will actually be able to manipulate it, but right now
awesome.
Google can come on as read-only. Yeah, pretty exciting.
The right stuff will be exciting. That'll be
yeah. The right stuff is kind of huge. And even if you're not making the event, even if you're just rescheduling and dragging stuff around, yeah, it's pretty. One of the neat things about it, I mean, not to dwell on it, but we were talking about machinery earlier. So let's say I have 3 lines of machinery and they have certain capacity levels. In iCal, you can drag an event from one calendar to another. And in Zulu, we map those calendars to fields in FileMaker. So that field may be a status field. And so you might have a calendar called under capacity and a calendar called over capacity. One's green, one's red. If you're on the road and you just take on some huge, you're a salesman, you just take on a big printing job for tomorrow afternoon, you open up your iCal and you drag line number 4, that Heidelberg 7-color press, drag it to over capacity. You've just changed it in FileMaker. You've changed the status of that line. So even though we think of iCal as kind of like for appointments and stuff, it really can let you manipulate any information that's tied to dates. Anyways, you can tell us about it.
But bolt-on calendars. That's the next one here. And what's this one compared to Zulu?
So we touched on this earlier. The bolt-on calendars are FileMaker Pro layouts that can be bolted onto something you already have and visualize your FileMaker records in a calendar format. So calendars are simple. The data is simple, right? It's just dates and times. But the display of that in, like a 30-day grid or a scheduling grid, that can be tough for a beginner or intermediate FileMaker user to build from scratch. But once they have a layout that does that, it's pretty easy for them to modify it and put new fields on it and change the way it looks and skin it so it looks like the rest of their solution. So, a large part of our business is selling this FileMaker template that folks paste into something they're already working on to add a calendar view to their database, to the database they built.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So the next one, I think it's a bigger one of discussion, FM search results. What exactly is this, and are there other things? The FM obviously stands for something.
Yes, for FileMaker. So this was built by a colleague of ours, and so we didn't write it. We're just the publishers here. This was written by Matt Navarre at msnmedia.com, and he does some huge projects in FileMaker. One of them is for the Oregon Department of Public Health, and it tracks all the serious disease cases in the state of Oregon, kind of outbreak kind of stuff. And the challenge that he had to face there was that a kid might walk into a clinic in one county, give a fake name, kind of forget his social security number, and be diagnosed with something serious. And a few days later, that kid gets killed in a car accident in another city. They actually find his actual ID. And Matt's database will link these 2 records when it turns out that this kid had tuberculosis. It'll actually link these 2 records, even though the names were partially entered and the social security numbers didn't quite match. So FM search results is kind of the fruit of that work. It introduces kind of fuzzy and iterative search to FileMaker. So normally in FileMaker, we search by example. You go into your layout and you put your cursor in the first name field, you type John, and you'll get all the contacts whose first name begins John. You'll get John and Jonathan. With FM search results, you search not only in that one table, but across all the tables in your database. So it'll find people whose first name is John. It'll find a project that has a note that has the word John in it. It'll find invoices for John's company. And then it can even go further and do name substitutions, right? Like, so I search for Jim. If it doesn't find any records, it can loosen and search for James. It can reverse a phone number's area code. It can reverse birth dates. It can start doing fuzzier and smarter searches. So a lot of people get it because they want to have that kind of Google-like search where they have a single field and it searches across their entire database. But developers are extending it to kind of do fuzzier searches. It's really kind of an interesting product. I mean, FileMaker Search is one of the great things about it. it's very easy to find and find even very complicated requests in FileMaker. So, find all the invoices that happened this month, then restrict that to those customers who purchased in California, then restrict that to those customers who spent more than $30,000. That kind of thing is really easy in FileMaker as opposed to like doing that in SQL. But FM search results is just kind of a much kind of friendlier way of getting it in information when you're not sure where to look for it. Right. So you and I have talked about Evernote a few times. And if I were keeping notes in FileMaker databases, I could just kind of use FM search results to search for the word Evernote. And I'd find it in a note in one event. I might find it in a project description. I might find it in an invoice line item summary. And FM search results would present all those results to me, regardless of kind of where it found them.
Okay. And then as far as FileMaker, how well can multiple databases interact? Would you be able to search through 5 different databases, and does the information link together at all?
Yeah. So FileMaker's a relational database. And so within a given FileMaker file, there are many, many database tables. Invoices, products, contacts. And FM search results does let you search across all of those. There's a very nice kind of API for a non-technical person to say, hey, when I'm searching in this table in invoices and FM search results thinks I'm entering a date, which fields should I be looking at? Maybe the invoice date or the modification date. So yeah, FileMaker can really tie all that stuff together. And even the results that FM search results presents, let's say I search for a phone number. In a traditional database, what it would find is a phone number record. But when you search for a phone number in FM search results, it knows that when you click on that, you don't want the phone number. You want the person attached to the phone number or the company attached to the phone number. And it kind of takes you right to that related record. Okay. So it's just like a little layer of smarts above kind of what's built into FileMaker.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, it's neat. Matt does amazing work. The other thing that's neat about that is Matt, he speaks at FileMaker DevCon about search performance in FileMaker, and he has these million and billion record tables he searches against. And while most of us think that FileMaker can be kind of slow to searching on big data like that, Matt's done a lot of work about what FileMaker is fast at. So for instance, even on a billion records, if you're searching an indexed field, there's no penalty for finding no records. So FM search results starts with these very precise searches because there's no penalty for finding 0 records. It iterates and loosens gradually until it starts finding things.
Oh, wow.
And most of us would think that kind of looping search on billions of records would just be a dog. And it turns out that it's not. This is one of the things FileMaker's actually best at. So he's got all this kind of knowledge about what FileMaker's good at, and he uses that to make the search experience, faster.
Pretty incredible, because if you do a search in Google and it's quoted and it doesn't find anything, it just says it doesn't find anything. It doesn't loosen up to try to find other things. It's pretty phenomenal that this can actually start as rigid as possible and just gradually
absolutely
looser.
In fact, in Matt's and in some of the custom deployments of it, right, the way it works is you search for Jim, no Jim found, it'll loosen to James, no James found, it'll soundex, right, which is an algorithm to find out what James sounds like, regardless of the character substitutions. It'll soundex James, right? Yeah. Then it'll do Levenstein distance on James, which is Levenstein distance is the number of keystrokes required to transform one name into another. So if I did Jamed because I hit the D instead of the S, it would know to try it with James instead of Jamed. And it'll keep iterating like that until it starts to find things.
Is this through built-in vocabulary, like it knows James is Jim, or is this through just is it through an automated thing, or how does it know James is Jim?
Those are good. Those are really good questions. So in the code for Zulu, for FM search results, in the scripts, Matt has created the common American English name substitution list.
Okay, I got you.
So if your use base was Hindi, you'd use a different one, right? And then the soundex is done with a FileMaker plugin that gives FileMaker access to Java libraries that understand soundex. So he's mixing a couple of different techniques to get FileMaker to do this stuff that seems very kind of high end, but is really within the realm of your average intermediate FileMaker developer.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable. You should work for Google.
Yeah, it's kind of cool stuff.
So the next one's mini calendars, and I'm guessing this implements mini calendars inside FileMaker. Is it
right? So it's just a little simple thing. FileMaker normally presents a pop-up calendar that goes away as soon as you pick a date. Like it looks like a little month. But a lot of users want an experience more like Travelocity.com, where you have 3-month persistent calendar. and you can select dates and date ranges. And this is a product developed by the Proof Group, proofgroup.com, that to kind of display those little tiny calendars on your layouts. Just a real simple plug and play thing.
Okay, cool. And then next one's FM Spark. This one's what's this one do? Because there's no I can't tell what it is.
Yeah, the name is this is also built by the guys at Proof Group, and their specialty is they do a lot of FileMaker work for small and mid-sized schools. And FM Spark is a mailing engine to kind of take merge mail and make it really accessible to users. So the use case is I have a lot of people in my organization that need to send out merge mail, often HTML mail, but they don't know HTML, and I don't want to let them define calculation fields in the database so that they can do things like Dear Jim and pull Jim out of a FileMaker database. So FM Spark has a really beautiful interface and a simple grammar to let non-technical people send out HTML and merge mail. So you can send out really elaborate mail out of information in the database like, Dear Jim, I'm glad you registered for these 6 courses. One of them is overcapacity. Here are some options, and all that being data-driven and automated. It's really sharp.
That sounds cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
And then the last one is Backmagic. So what's this one all about?
So Backmagic is a free utility. It's one of our most popular things. When you build a FileMaker database, you often have a lot of layouts. So I'm on a contact layout, and I jump over to my contacts project, and then I print an invoice for that project, and then I want to go back to there's no back button built into FileMaker. And the back button, so back and forward is this kind of behavior that users are trained on as they learn how to use software in browsers. So for developers that want to add back and forward navigation to FileMaker, Backmagic does that, and it understands all FileMaker's little nuances like nested tab controls and the records and stuff. So it's very simple and very easy to implement. And we have a suite of free things. We have a free version of the calendar, but this is probably our most popular free gizmo because it's a nice thing for a developer to be able to say yes. When a customer says, "Hey, can I have a back button?" A lot of developers have to, used to hem and haw and say, "Well, FileMaker doesn't really include that. It'd be kind of expensive." And so now there's just this free thing that can be like, sure, and within like 20 minutes have that up and running.
That's pretty cool. Does that work on the iPad as well, or?
Sure does.
That's pretty cool. I was thinking shake the iPad to move back or something.
Well, it'd be nice if we had a shake trigger. But unfortunately, the FileMaker on the iPad, FileMaker Go, doesn't understand shake. I'd like to think it will soon, but it doesn't now. So now you'd have to click this little button to go back to a previous layout.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's move on to kind of how has the iPad and the iPhone changed things for you as a developer? Has it given you more customers or anything like that?
Yeah, this is interesting. I mean, if I could be really honest, I'm not sure what it's done for us so far. I think this is going to be very, very big, but I think like all truly disruptive things, it's taking a little while for people to kind of catch on with what's possible with the iPad and the iPhone and running FileMaker on it. I mean, there's some of our customers have done some quick things right away, and our products like Seed Code Complete, they run on the iPad. But in terms of what people are doing that they literally just couldn't do before, we're not seeing that much new stuff. I mentioned some use cases when we were speaking to Tim earlier about doctors' offices using the iPad for sign-in, and how instead of just signing in, you can expose all sorts of other information to the user. Like maybe there's a consent form that changes every 6 months, and we now know in the database whether the user has signed that version of the consent form, so we can deliver this different information to them. But I think that the biggest thing that we're doing right now with iPad is that we're doing a lot of kind of remote billing stuff. So I'm a plumber, and I've always had FileMaker to tell me who my customer is next and what to do when I get to her house. But now I'm taking FileMaker into her house. I'm showing her pictures of faucets and other things, and I'm billing her right there, and she's signing with her finger on my iPad so that I can, I have that transaction completed, and I'm out the door and moving on to the next customer.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So you could have the inventory of all the products, like your catalog and a database. In that same file, you could have a billing area where you just touch, say you touch like send to cart, and then it adds it to like a billing sheet or something like that.
Absolutely. I mean, the same invoicing layout that we built for them to use in the back office, right?
Yeah.
We make it a little simpler and maybe a little bigger, button-wise. plumbers, big hands, right? And now they're using that same layout in the field to make their invoices. And what's amazing about this, and this is, I think, one of the things I'm kind of toying with the most, and I think there's a big open question now, is what's the division of labor between the remote app that's in the house and the office app? If they're connected to each other and there's no division of labor, they both can do the same things, then the back office, they know exactly when technician A has gotten the signature from customer B. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of amazing, right? And so when somebody calls and says, "Hey, I got a leak, who can come over?" They literally know who's free, right? Because they know that, well, yeah, Jim hasn't gotten his signature yet. He's still under the sink over there.
And once they had that signature, that'd move the business along faster because the people in the office can just, once it's done, they can start working on it.
Absolutely. I mean, that kind of thing is huge. But in many cases, that kind of live connection won't be practical because that plumbing is in a basement and there's no cell signal.
Yeah.
or the plumber wants to have a faster experience. I mean, let's face it, there are trade-offs for all this stuff, right? And using the app connected back to the server is a little slower than using the app locally. Sure. And the plumber may just be like, I cannot stand this waiting for these screens to refresh. I just want to use this thing locally and maybe sync up later in the day.
When he's driving back on.
Yeah, or something. So that division of labor stuff, right? How much power do we deliver to the remote application as opposed to building something that may be specialized or maybe asynchronous from the back office? Those are the really tough decisions that I think people are starting to wrestle with. But in general, the idea that we can interact with that data remotely using an inexpensive and very user-friendly device is pretty rad.
Yeah. So the Go app can actually have finger-based like art signatures and things like that then?
So that's how fast this stuff is moving ahead, is that's not built into FM Go, but developers have figured it out. There's a great example at geistinteractive.com/GoSign. Yeah, I mean, the way it kind of works is FileMaker can display web viewers, right? A portion of the layout can be a URL. Mm-hmm. That URL can run HTML5. HTML5 can use the canvas tag. The canvas tag lets us draw.
Oh, wow.
And a clever developer can read what you drew, right?
Yeah.
So that's how these guys have gotten that working.
Oh, that's really cool.
And who knows what's going to be working next? It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, with 1.1, we've got app integrations. So I'm wondering, what are you most looking forward to as far as future apps that hook into the FileMaker databases now?
It's funny. I'm not actually as bullish about that as some people are. So the app integration you're talking about is that I can have another application running on the iPad that can send information to FileMaker Go. So the example that FileMaker uses is a barcode scanner. Right, I can take a picture with and that little barcode scanner app knows to take the camera, decode the barcode, and send it as text over to. But think about the signature capture thing we were just talking about. What if that were a third-party app that could talk to FileMaker the same way? Would I want to leave the FileMaker Go layout, leave the invoice?
We've already got a lot of this functionality by just the URL implementations.
We have some of it. Yeah, we have some of it. So I think I'm waiting for the app, that third-party app that's really going to blow me out of the water. But right now, I'm happy kind of staying in my FileMaker Go experience and using the web viewer to get some of these other things in.
Is the barcode stuff is that possible within the app itself and then FileMaker Go through URL type stuff? Or
it is, yeah. It's not only possible; it may be faster. So Zero Blue Technology, I think it's zerobluetech.com, sells a barcode scanner that works with FileMaker, and it kind of works like it does on the desktop, right? It's keyboard emulation. So you put your cursor in the product field and you hit the scanner and boom, it comes in. There's some little weird tweaks about it, right? Like it seems that the iPad can only accept one Bluetooth keyboard. So that when you have your scanner plugged in, it doesn't know, it kind of hides the keyboard from you. And I'm not really sure what the details of all that are. I mean, there'll definitely be a place where the third-party app is superior and a place where a resident or an in FileMaker Go experience makes more sense. I'm not sure what that, what that division of labor is going to be.
Right. So the 1.1 update came out last week. That's why I actually requested the Wednesday time, because it's like, it just comes out. It's a good day to do the show.
Absolutely right.
All the NDA stuff gets lifted. So they added insert photos in container field, save or send databases, import databases, and the integration stuff. What of that are you most excited about?
two things. One, the third-party app integration is accomplished by a URL scheme. So basically, if you open a URL in any application on your iOS device that begins with this FileMaker Pro syntax and ends with the name of a database, the name of a script, and a script parameter, that URL is effectively sending instructions to FileMaker Go. This could allow us to do incredible things, not just between apps that are new, like this scanner app, but between apps we already have, like email and iCal. I mean, what would it mean to open up, to have links in email that would create actions in your FileMaker database? Simple actions like approve this PO or report for work, say that you're going to attend a meeting. Little actions or really big actions, right? Like I could send somebody an email that says, when you click this link, we're going to start some huge process in the database, right? Kick off your project and launch milestones and print things, and the server is going to start to. I don't know what you can do with that, but that's very intriguing to me. And then the other thing is that since now Go can import data from a served FileMaker database, the idea that I might have an untethered kind of dumb client in FileMaker Go that could periodically suck down like a to-do list, a work list, inventory updates, that's pretty rad. And it speaks to, it's more tools in the tool chest as we start to figure out what this division of labor is between the remote app and the server and the desktop app.
And before with, basically you were stuck with iTunes file sharing and then just simply working directly off the server. Were those the only options before?
That's right. So if I was untethered and I needed new data, I needed to get onto iTunes. Right, or I needed to download a new file.
Right,
you could always email me a FileMaker Pro database, and I open it in my email. It opens in FM Go and loads onto my machine. But now I can have a database that's already open, and that goes and gets some relevant data from the server, and then I can send that whole database back to the server. So this idea that I may have an untethered data collection device is pretty rich.
Right, and I'm guessing there's probably problems if you're adding a bunch of data while others are working on the file itself. How does FileMaker deal with that?
Well, I mean, this is what's so cool about FileMaker, right? Like in the example we were just talking about, the FileMaker Go app would be untethered, right? So that's a single user doing its thing. But, FileMaker's got this great record locking scheme, right? It's been importing data from multiple sources for a long time. So kind of once that data comes back to FileMaker, we as developers have all the tools we've always had to bring that data in and do dupe checks and conflict resolutions or import updating. And I mean, what Tim was alluding to in our last conversation is that syncing, like real syncing, that's rocket science. I mean, look at Apple, right? There are a lot of smart folks over there. And that whole mobile me syncing thing, still not just running like it's supposed to. Mm-hmm. Syncing is really hard. And I would imagine that most of us FileMaker developers are kind of straying away from that. But the idea that we're going to create new records or flag records for manual inspection by somebody back at the office, this seems like no-brainer stuff, and we'll be doing a lot of that.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff. So with all this going on, what's missing from FileMaker to make it like a desktop replacement on the iPad? Will that ever become something where you can actually use just the iPad instead of the laptop or whatever?
Well, let me ask you a question. You mentioned when we were talking to Tim that you use OmniFocus, right?
Yeah.
Do you use it on the iPad?
Oh, yeah, exclusively. I do the data entry on the Mac just because it's easier to just empty my mind there, and then I just sync it and just use the iPad alone.
You use the iPad for processing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Same here, right? Same here. I have a keyboard on the Mac. Sometimes I'm copy and pasting emails and URLs. I do a lot of data entry on the Mac. But on the iPad, that's where I do the processing. It's almost like OmniFocus has been waiting for the iPad because it's all about sorting and checking and rearranging things. The iPad's this perfect interface for OmniFocus.
Yeah, it really is.
So we use them for really different things, and I think that's what's going to be happening with Go, right? We're going to do some kind of work on the desktop version of FileMaker and some other kind of work on the Go side of FileMaker. Something that the iPad is suited for, just kind of the way that OmniFocus is. I mean, really, OmniFocus is the first app that really unlocked my iPad for me.
Yeah.
It's really just made for that interface. When I drag things change the sort order of my to-do items on the iPad, I'm like, I am using this device for what it was meant to be used for. Yeah. And I haven't had that kind of aha experience with a FileMaker Go app yet, but it's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got you. That's a great analogy because, I mean, the iPad it's perfect for OmniFocus, and I think the Go app will eventually become that for FileMaker. And the Omni Group folks have done a great job just demonstrating. We've got 3 different devices that do 3 different things, so we're going to do them differently and show you the
Absolutely.
thing that, takes advantage of all of them.
Absolutely. And so the challenge to FileMaker is that right now they've impressed us all with fidelity. We're all in the thrall of fidelity. When I open up a FileMaker database that I wrote on the desktop and I open it up in the iPad, it's the same. It's incredible. It's the same. But maybe fidelity isn't the goal.
Right.
I mean, Omni decided that they weren't going to replicate the desktop version of OmniFocus on the iPad exactly.
Yeah.
They were
the
going to
same data, but it's a little bit different.
A little bit different. We're going to remove some features. We're going to add some features. And as developers, we get to make that same call with our FileMaker databases, right? And so which way are we as developers going to choose? Are we going to build, are we going to stick with fidelity, which has a lot going for it, right? No retraining, no, learn once, employ everywhere. Or are we going to say, okay, here's this new device. What does it do best, and what interfaces are best for it? And we don't know yet. We're still in the thrall of fidelity.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, I've been learning a lot about FileMaker just from talking to you. And Tim, I'm quite a FileMaker newbie. So, are there any final thoughts or final just things you want to talk about before we end it for today?
No, I'm good. Both this and the conversation with Tim. He's a really sharp guy. There's some deep stuff there. So now I need to go reflect.
Yeah. So I'm hoping the listeners have been appreciating the FileMaker stuff, because I'm thinking most of the listeners are like me, that this is just brand new material, brand new. It's FileMaker's been around for a long time, but not everyone knows about it. So I'm hoping this opens their eyes to what's possible and what it's all about.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, FileMaker, their mission statement back in FileMaker 3 is really coming true now, like giving non-technical people access to making software. They're doing a great job.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, John, for your time, and people can find you over at seedcode.com.
That's right. Seedcode, CODE, seedcode.com. And thanks, Tim. This has been great.
Oh, thank you. Thanks
right,
again. Well, that concludes part 2 of episode 100. And if you'd like to find out more information about FileMaker, I did a part 1 episode of this. It's episode 93, where I have a one-on-one interview with Tim Sambura at sambura.com. So check out that episode. It went out last Wednesday and Thursday, September 22nd and 23rd. So check out that information for more information on FileMaker. And I'd like to thank, once again, Tim and John for their time discussing FileMaker with me. They are both FileMaker developers and know quite a bit more on this subject than I do. So it was a blast to talk to them, and I can't wait to talk with them again about future updates to FileMaker and where FileMaker goes from here. As always, as we wrap up the show here, if you want to send your feedback, I'd greatly appreciate that. You can do that by emailing me at iPadpossibilities@gmail.com and calling into 209-542-iPad. That's 4723 for those without the alphabetical keyboard there. So call in and leave in your voicemail. I'd love to hear from you. And I'd love to hear this week especially what has been your favorite episode. It's been 100 episodes. What's been your favorite? I know what my favorite episode has been. It's earlier on. I remember it vividly. So love to hear what your favorite episode is, and just send your feedback. I'd love to hear from you. So that's iPadpossibilities@gmail.com and 209-542-iPad. If you'd like to find out more information about this podcast, please visit iPadpossibilities.com. There's information there about the premium podcast where you get the episodes 24 hours in advance. You get screencasts and all sorts of extra goodies, so check that out at iPadpossibilities.com. You can also get the episodes on your iPhone or iPad by purchasing the iPad Possibilities podcast app. It's in the App Store for $2.99, and you get the shows, once again, 24 hours in advance with that application. So go to iPadpossibilities.com for more information on all of that. And thanks again for listening to this podcast. It's been 100 episodes, and I can't wait for the next 100. And as always, I'll be there for Sunday night's live show. You can check out the live episode 101, this Sunday night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with John Finnan. We'll be discussing the latest iPad news and most likely some sort of focused topic to talk about. So join us. It's at iPadPossibilities.com and just click on that little live tab, live link at the very bottom there, and we'll take you right to the live show. It's at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Sunday night. So until then, this has been the iPad Possibilities Podcast on tppn.tv. This is Tim. I'll talk to everyone again Sunday night.